6 months after the divorce, he saw her again, unexpectedly, shockingly, impossibly, standing outside the old cafe they once visited every Sunday, the morning sun framing her like a memory he had spent half a year trying to bury. And when she turned and he saw the unmistakable curve of her stomach, full and rounded and far too advanced to be anything recent, his world froze because in 1 second he realized she never had an abortion, never ended the pregnancy they had argued over until their marriage cracked like thin glass under too much pressure, and everything he thought he understood about the past 6 months shattered inside him. He hadn't planned to walk down that street. He had been avoiding that part of town deliberately, purposefully, because every corner carried the shadow of something he had loved and lost, but that morning he left his apartment late, took a different route, and fate, or cruelty, brought him here. She glanced up, and for a moment, time slowed the way it does before an earthquake. Her eyes widened, softening with an emotion he couldn't decipher, something too complicated to be simple regret and too warm to be anger, and he felt his breath catch because he had not seen those eyes in half a year, yet they still remembered him. He remembered everything too. The nights they fought over money, over fear, over responsibility, the nights she cried and he didn't know how to hold her. The morning she told him she was pregnant, the afternoon he panicked and said all the wrong things, the evening she decided she wouldn't bring a child into a home full of tension and walls. He remembered the way she had told him she scheduled the appointment. He remembered the way she refused to talk afterward. He remembered the divorce papers arriving with no explanation other than, "We will only hurt each other if we stay." And all this time, he had believed she went through with it. All this time he carried guilt like a stone tied to his chest, but he forced himself to accept it because he thought the alternative was too painful for her. But now, looking at her swollen belly, round enough to be at least 7 months along, maybe even 8, he knew she hadn't ended anything, knew she had carried their child alone, carried their future alone, carried everything alone while he spiraled in confusion, convinced that she hated him, that she chose to erase the last piece of them. His legs moved without his permission. "Arohi," he said, his voice cracking like he hadn't used it in years. She stood still, one hand resting protectively on her stomach. "Arman," she replied softly, and the way she said his name felt like a memory brushing against reality. You're pregnant," he said, though it was painfully obvious. She nodded. "Yes." He swallowed, the weight of 6 months pressing against his ribs. You didn't." She shook her head before he could finish. "No, I didn't." Thousands of questions crashed inside him. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you leave? Why did you let me believe something so different? Why didn't you trust me? Why? But none of them felt like the right place to begin, so he simply asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" She took a deep breath, her fingers absent-mindedly stroking the curve of her belly the way a mother instinctively comforts her unborn child. "Because we were falling apart, Arman." Every conversation turned into a fight. Every word felt like a weapon. "You were scared. I was scared. And then you said you weren't ready." "I said it out of panic," he whispered. "I never meant." "I know," she interrupted, her voice trembling. "But in that moment, I felt like I was alone. And I realized I didn't want our child to come into a home where love had turned into fear." He opened his mouth to protest. To say he would have changed, he would have tried, he would have fought for them, but she continued, "I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to stay out of obligation. I didn't want resentment to grow between us. I didn't want our child to feel unwanted." His chest tightened. "But I never would have resented our child." "Maybe you wouldn't have," she admitted. "But maybe you would have resented me for choosing something you weren't ready for." He stepped closer, unable to keep the ache out of his voice. "I deserved to know." "Maybe," she said quietly. "But I was trying to protect all of us. It wasn't the right way, but it was the only way I could handle at the time." He felt the sting of truth in her words, because he remembered who he was 6 months ago, confused, drowning in work stress, terrified of responsibility, terrified of failing as a father the same way his own father had failed him. Maybe he hadn't been ready. Maybe he would have made everything worse. But now, standing here, looking at the child he didn't even know had survived the storm, something inside him shifted. "How far along are you?" he asked. 7.5 months, she said. The number hit him like a blow. So the baby survived everything. Yes, she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. Every day I felt them kicking. I thought, maybe I'm doing the right thing. Maybe I can give them a good life, even if it's just me. He blinked hard. It didn't have to be just you. Back then, it did, she said. But now, he asked, voice cracking. Now it doesn't have to be. She looked up at him, searching his face the way she used to when they were still them. Armand, don't say things because you feel guilty seeing me like this. I'm not guilty, he said firmly. I'm angry, hurt, shocked, confused. But more than anything, I'm here. And I want to be here. Her breath trembled. It's been a long 6 months. For me too, he said softly. Every day I woke up feeling like I'd lost everything. And I thought you ended the pregnancy because you didn't trust me. But you were just scared. We both were, she said. But I'm not scared anymore, he whispered. At least not of being part of this. She placed her hand on her stomach again. The baby's due in December. December, he repeated, stunned. That's soon. Yes, Arohi, let me be there, he said, voice raw. For the birth, for everything after, for both of you. She looked torn, the weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future pressing between them. I don't know if we can go back to what we were. Maybe we don't need to go back, he said gently. Maybe we start new, as parents first, and if life wants, maybe more later. But let me be part of this story. Please. Tears slipped down her cheeks, and she didn't wipe them away. I missed you, she confessed quietly, words trembling like delicate glass. He felt something inside him break open. I missed you too. For a moment, they simply stood there, two broken halves cautiously reaching toward something whole. Then she took a small step toward him. Do you want to feel the baby? He froze, breath catching. Can I? She guided his hand, placing it gently on her warm, rounded belly. And within seconds, he felt it, a small, gentle kick. A life he didn't know he still had. A life he thought had been erased. A life that was his child, his future. Something deep inside him swelled. Love, fear, wonder, guilt, hope, all blending into one overwhelming tide. Hi, he whispered to the baby, his voice shaking. It's me. I'm your dad. Arohi's breath hitched, and she covered his hand with hers. And in that moment, it didn't matter how broken they had been, how painful their past was, how impossible their future seemed, all that mattered was the tiny heartbeat between them, the proof that some stories don't end where you think, they just pause until both people are ready to speak again. And Armand knew, with a clarity he hadn't felt in years, that he wasn't going to walk away this time. Not from her, not from their child, not from the life that was already waiting to be lived. If you want part 2, more emotional scenes, hospital scenes, reconciliation, or a version with dialogue spaced out, just tell me.